Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. My guest today is Harrison Forbes. Harrison is a serial entrepreneur. He has started and sold more than 10 businesses over various industries in his lifetime. He's also well known throughout the United States for being a news media expert, celebrity pet industry spokesperson. He's author of the best-selling book, Dog Talk, and he is currently an industry partner with Maxim Partners. Welcome to the show, Harrison.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to talk to you, man.
Good to
It's been
talk
a
to you
while.
too. It has been a while. So tell us something interesting about yourself most people don't know.
Oh, wow.
Start off with a hard one there.
Starting right off with a brain twister.
There you go.
Huh. Wow. I don't know, man. Feed me some kind of, give me a direction because there's probably a ton of stuff. I tend to be, even though I do a lot of media and all that, I've always kind of, to my agent and everybody else's ire, don't live out loud online very much. I don't know. Probably. I think a lot of people. Well, I don't know if they follow me online. They probably know that I've got a whole bunch of kids, and yeah, that's probably I'm kind of a dad first, and
Okay.
about to be an empty nester, so that's a whole new set of realities of kind of like wide open world that I'm dealing with this year. So I'm about 7 months away from that, and thinking, oh wait, I've got a lot of choices I can make. It's not. It's just different. So yeah, I'm excited
Absolutely.
about it though.
That's awesome. So you grew up, I believe, in Jackson, Tennessee, and you went to school at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. What
Yep.
was your childhood like and your college years like for you?
I mean, my childhood was great. Growing up in Jackson, the family had a lot of history there, and then my parents got divorced when I was about 12, and then my mom got remarried at the end of my eighth grade year, and we moved to Dallas, and I moved with her. My oldest brother was already in school at SMU, and so moved to Dallas, and it's funny. I think it's one of the greatest things that happened to me in high school, and I've always felt that way, but now being a father of going through the teen years with four different kids, it's been such a blessing of, I went to a small private school in Jackson that like eighth grade, I think we had 12 people in the entire eighth grade class.
Wow.
Then I go ninth grade to a 5A super school in Metro Dallas, and we had, I think there were 800 or 900 people in the freshman class. And it was, almost 3,000 students. And I had walked in first day as a freshman, ninth grader, didn't know a single person. And, it's weird, my last year of school. So I went there my freshman and sophomore year. I went back to Tennessee my junior year. And then my senior year, I was so divided because I couldn't imagine not being a senior at both places because there were so many things I loved about both schools. So I split my senior year,
Oh,
and
cool.
I did the first half, and part of it was in Texas they still weren't going back to school till after Labor Day, and Tennessee started the first week in August. So I got a whole month extra, and then in Tennessee at the private school, seniors got out 6 weeks early to do shadowing programs. So I think I went to school like 5.5 months my senior year. So
The
that
plant.
played a little bit into it, but
Sure.
it's one of those things where seeing how a school operated as a new person, where you didn't have roots in that, and the benefits of what a massive, really big public school can do for you, so far as the variety of programs and the variety of people and things to do that a small private school just didn't have the bandwidth for things. So there was a lot of that I really liked. But then, most of my childhood friends and everything were still at home at school in Tennessee. And so it's definitely something I don't regret doing. And so now, just like you and I were talking about before we went on the air, with modern technology now, I've got my Facebook friends from both schools that I can keep up with, and I go to both reunions and jump back. And so it's been fantastic. And I wouldn't trade that move to Texas. It really had a lot of influence on how I raised my kids. And when we I talked about it a lot with them of the pluses and minuses of smaller and larger schools. And we moved, a time or two during those years when they were younger. And I was able to give them a lot of kind of pep talks and different things and every single one of them have said to me, I'm glad moving out of Tennessee for a year or two and experiencing, living in Los Angeles and traveling and doing some of those things really has given them a lot of things that they appreciate now and some, scope of, when you're a teen, if you're in one place all the time or even a small school, that world can become everything to you. So when you hit a bump in the road in high school or middle school at a small school, it feels like your entire life is crumbling.
Right.
And I just remembered when I was in a junior in high school, if there was anything dramatic or some kind of like a girlfriend breakup or something in in one of the places, on the weekends I could go back home or go to Texas and it was a whole different group of people. And you're like, okay, there's a big world out here.
Right.
It kept you from like internalizing and over dramatizing stuff that I think is, for teens, that's like a huge issue that's, that just exacerbates depression and suicides, all of it. And so I really made an effort to constantly let the kids see that there's a big world out there that has tons of kids that don't know you and don't know any of your problems or anything. And you can, start fresh if you need to, or just that things aren't as big a deal as you think they are at home.
You began your career as a dog trainer and you eventually started hosting a pet talk radio show in Jackson. How did that come about for you?
It's a funny story. The pet stuff was, I talk about this more. I steered away from talking about this for years on the radio because I felt like I would get a lot of negative comments about it. And I probably do when I talk about it now a little bit from the pet people, not negative, but it just, for me, the pet stuff has always been something that I'm good at, better, superior to loving it. And I say that let me explain. I deal with people every day that their pets are their entire lives. They are morning, dinner, night. I mean, it's everything for them. And I applaud them for that. And I think that's great for them. I have not been one of those people. I always sometimes use an analogy of like, if you speak Russian, just because you understand when people are talking and what they're saying doesn't mean you have to love everything about Russian culture and love everything about the people and all that. And that's a little bit kind of my thing. I've always had a very innate ability to understand animal behavior, especially canine behavior, since I was a little kid. And then had the benefit of having some really good mentors that were able to shape that with a lot of training and how-tos that allowed me to become really take that natural instinct and natural ability and turn it into something better. And I love dogs and I love pets, always have. Huge animal lover, but it doesn't consume my life like it does for a lot of people. And that's not a slight on anything. It's just, that's just kind of the way it is. So anyway, I'd been doing a dog business in Georgia. I'd moved it there in college just because I was importing dogs. And so the flights to Atlanta were every day and nonstop. And so it was a big difference maker on that part of the business. And when I moved back home to Tennessee, I had some other businesses. I was doing real estate. I was doing had a restaurant or two restaurants with another friend. And I built a little training facility out at a family farm property. And there was this was in 93, I believe. And talk radio was going through a big surge right then where it was the transition of talk radio, Rush Limbaugh and some of these others had been on the air for a while, but those were all AM dials. Nobody
Right.
did talk radio on FM back then. And there was a group out of Brownsville, Tennessee, and they owned a series of stations and they took the dial, the 1015 dial in Jackson, and turned it into an FM all talk station. And it was the first one in the country that did all talk that had some local talk as well. It wasn't just doing syndicated shows and replaying them. And it's funny, I appreciate that more now, because years later, when I was doing my radio show, fast forward 18 years, and I was doing it in Los Angeles. And I remember meeting the vice president of Westwood One, and he was like, yeah, News Talk 101.5 FM. He said, I talk about them in a class I teach at UCLA. And I'm like, what? And he just started naming off all the guys at the station and all this. I was like, he said, it's legendary. He said, they were the pioneers. They were the first people to ever be able to pull that off and integrate and build local talk shows and some other some syndicated shows as well. And he said, yeah, it's in the annals of history. I was like, wow.
That's awesome.
It was nice when I went back and talked to all the guys at the station about that. But that was a good, to be honest, it was something that let me go back to how that started. So there was a guy who was about my dad's age, and he had been a talk show host and a TV guy, and had left Jackson years before and got in the cable industry and done very well, and moved back to Jackson to retire. And so he started doing the morning show on that station. Had a lot of experience, and great storyteller, and a really good host. And he loved animals, but if he didn't know about a subject, he would make you think he did. And so I knew Bill since I was a kid, and he would talk about things, and sometimes I just had to pick up the phone. I would be so incensed. He'd get something so wrong, and I knew people were believing him, and I would kind of call and correct him. So that happened a time or two, and every time I was on, then people would call in. It was a live call-in show, and say, "Hey, is that guy still there? I've got a pet question." So finally, one day, he called me and he said, "Hey, let's go out to eat." So we went to this little diner in Jackson, and he said, "Why don't you do a radio show on pets?" And I was like, no, I've got no interest. So he kind of laid it out for me, and he was like, "Well, just try this." So I started going on his show on Friday and doing 1 hour where I would just sit in and people could ask pet questions, and it would just completely clog the phone lines up because everybody had pet questions. So then after about 3 times of doing that, he was like, "Look, you got to do your own show." And I was doing a lot of real estate at the time, and that's got a lot of name recognition kind of need to it, and I really kind of did it for the local name recognition part for my other businesses, honestly, to get started in it. It was all kind of intellectual property, so I didn't have to. It's not like a news show where or a sports show where you got to look up all the scores and see who's hurt, who's playing. I could walk in off the street and sit down and just start answering questions. So it was easy for me back then. So yeah, that's how it started. And so Dave Ramsey, his first affiliate, he had started in Nashville at News Talk there at Super Talk. And his first affiliate was the station in Jackson. And for a while, that was the only 2 stations he had. So back then, he would come once a month to Jackson and do the show there. And so we got to meet. And then later on, he and another guy from Jackson helped me get another show at Super Talk. And then I learned a lot there doing that show. And then at the same time, I was starting to MC some things a little bit and go to some fundraisers. And I was in New York and met one of the producers from Regis and Kelly, and she was like, "We need a new pet person. Have you done TV before?" And I had done a local show in Jackson with Kelly Cash that didn't have anything to do with pets. It was like a Regis and Kelly about West Tennessee. And so I had some tape to send them. And then I didn't hear anything for like 6 months. And then one day they called and they said, "Can you be up here tomorrow? And we want to do X, Y, Z." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then, it's one of those things where once I did that show, then everybody called. It's funny. I didn't know anything more than I did before, but once you've done a national show like that, then it was simple to get on Today's Show and GMA and Fox News and all the others. And that just kind of started launching into a whole career that I had not planned from the media standpoint side of it. And it just kind of, I never planned it out this way for sure, but it's been a great ride.
In '96, you won an Excellence in Media Award from the Tennessee Veterinary and Medical Association, and you started
Yeah,
hosting that show with Kelly. I think it was called "Let's Talk Tennessee." And then
that's it.
the pet radio, show started syndicating nationally. I think you were over 80 markets, including LA and New York. All of that happened pretty quickly after you got started.
Mike, I'm losing you. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Are you
Oh,
there?
wait, sorry. Yeah, it froze for a second and
Yeah.
then it
Okay.
sped up.
What I
If
was
you would
saying is,
just repeat that last,
yeah,
yeah.
you started syndicating into over 80 markets, and including LA and New York, and things started moving really fast. What do you attribute most to that quick movement? Is it when going on Regis and Kelly was that one of the big things that you think really launched it, like you talked about?
Yeah, I think part of it was that was obviously a big step because that gave me a national footprint. And sometimes it's opportunity and luck too. I mean, there was I always say this about the pet industry. There's tons of trainers and people that know more than I do, but there's by nature a lot of people that get into pet training and pet care do it because they're very introverted and they're not people.
Right.
And so they get along with pets, can't stand people. And pet people like that love to tell you, I hate people, but I love pets. So the rub is that then it makes for, if you have a real expert, a lot of times they're just not even interested in doing media. And then conversely, sometimes you have people that like pets that are media people, but then you start hitting them with real questions, or they start getting into kind of science of things, and they can't answer any of that. They don't have any credibility. So, it was the timing was good. I was kind of the right age, and early 30s and mid 30s when all that was kind of kicking off, and so it was enough to be TV young, but then also be old enough to have some experience under your belt. So I think that was part of it. And then part of it was just tenacity. I think, for me, it was going to New York and meeting some of the media people and then going on a few shows there. All of a sudden, being a guy from a little town in Tennessee, it's always oh, well, I couldn't do, there's probably big people that do that. And, to get on that and learning how that system works, how you get booked on shows and that kind of thing. But then going and doing it and then having positive feedback, it was like, I always call it the why not me moment of I remember sitting there thinking, well, that worked out pretty good. I mean, so why not me? Why can't I be the kind of the spokesperson for the industry and bridge the gap between consumers and all the stuff? And it was like, okay, I can. And so once that switch flipped in my head, then I started getting, aggressive with it and going after things and deciding, okay, I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to do this. I want to do that, and going after it and realizing that the whole big world of New York and LA and all that, the truth is those things are made up of people. And so if you can get along with people and have a good rapport with people, then that's it. And there's no reason to build these big barriers coming from small town wherever.
You said, quote, many people are so in love with their dogs that they can't say no to anything that their pets want. Far better is to persist, insist, and be consistent with the house rules to help your four-footed student see you as a reliable teacher and leader, unquote. What you said, it completely makes sense. And most people probably know that that's true. But why do people have such a hard time doing that with their pets?
I don't know, but boy, they do. I think it's just, I think a lot. I mean, I think there's different reasons for different people. Some people, sometimes the dynamic of a household is difficult because there's multiple people living there, and each person has a different level and a different set of rules for their pet. And so there's a lot of confusion and ambiguity there that happens. So it's difficult to kind of set a more structured kind of life for you and your pet where you coexist well.
Right.
But personally, I think for the individual, a lot of times people they cast so many human emotions on their dog, way more than the dog has. And so, um, you know, a lot of the things about how a dog remembers things, how they learn, how they feel, how all of those things, they pour all these human uh, elements into it or anthropomorphize it, and it doesn't translate. But people are very slow to, or resistant rather, to acknowledging that, because people want to believe that their dog thinks just like they do and has, that you can sit there and have a conversation with it and it knows what you're saying. And, so sometimes I've been, the trainer in me is not always the most consumer friendly sometimes, just because, I get a little impatient sometimes when people just ignore science and ignore what everything tells them, and but they make their lives difficult with their pet. I think that's, to me, the biggest tragedy in the pet industry is how oftentimes people, when somebody gets a dog, they want that Rin Tin Tin moment or that Lassie life, or that kind of thing where you have this great lifestyle where everybody just, it's seamless and everybody knows what the other one wants, and you don't have problems and all that. And that's, one of the foundation, that's the visualization people have when they get a pet for the first time. Rarely does it turn out that way. And it's a shame, because a lot of times people have made their bed so messy, uh, and if they would just take the time to learn a little bit more and be a little more disciplined about the way they structure their pet's life, they can have that, but they just don't. And the pet ends up ruling their life, or, just commands a lot of unnecessary energy and emotion.
Soon after you talk about, end up being the go-to person in the industry. You help train dogs for films in Hollywood, including Francis Ford Coppola's film The Rainmaker. And
Right there in Memphis.
yeah, right here. And many national TV shows. You were on Larry King, CBS This Morning, Today Show, CNN, Fox, and many more. It had to be, pretty exciting time for you.
It was, the thing with Rainmaker happened way before all the media stuff. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that, talking about, how I got into that part of it. That was in, I think, 97 when that was filmed. So I did have that experience when I started doing the radio and the TV stuff came around. It made me where I wasn't, I had dipped my toes into that and been around the, so quick story on that, because it was such an insane story. I was in Jackson. It was the middle of the week, and phone rings at almost midnight. I was already asleep. My wife was teaching school at the time, and it was a trainer friend of mine from Atlanta. And he said, "This producer from Hollywood's getting ready to call you. They're filming a movie in Memphis. They're having a bunch of problems with the dogs. They're trying to find somebody to fix it. They're under a lot of pressure. I gave him your number, and it's a real call, so answer it." Because, this was, I didn't even have caller ID back then.
Right.
And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Just hang up, because they're going to be calling you in a second." So phone calls. It's this producer. We're filming this movie. Didn't say who it was or what. Just said we're filming a feature film in Memphis, and we've got this. We got these two Dobermans in this scene, and we just can't get it to work. But it's part of the script contract, and we want it in the film, but we just can't get it. We've been trying to get this shot for 2 days, and so we need help. I said, "All right, describe the thing for me." So she described a little bit about what they were trying to shoot, which was, two dogs are, one of the characters is walking by on a sidewalk, and the dogs are behind a fence, and the dogs are aggressively barking at the guy while he walks. That was it. I said, "I tell you what, I'm going to save you a trip. I supply all the Memphis city and the county dogs. There's a bunch of police dogs there. I can have two of them guys come over tomorrow, and they can handle that in 5 minutes. What kind of dogs are they?" So I told her. She said, "Can't do it. It has to be Dobermans." I said, "What are you talking about? Why Dobermans?" She said, "It's in the contract with the author and the screenwriter, and we can't deviate from that." And I was like, "Well, that's a problem then." she said, we got these 2 dogs here with this trainer from out of town. And so anyway, I said, so she said, what do you charge a day? And I didn't know. So I threw it. I thought, well, it's a big Hollywood thing. I mean, 1,000 a day. And she said, okay, we'll pay you an extra day if you can come right now. I'm like, it's midnight. She said, you don't understand. We're really behind schedule and this is costing us a lot of money. So I found out later it was costing them, and this is a crazy number. They were burning on their budget $10,000 a minute when they were rolling. When they said roll, when you factored in all of the hundreds of people there and all that stuff, that the way they do their budget per minute of actual filming, they were burning 10 grand a minute. So obviously should have asked for a lot more money. But so I got in the car, drove to Memphis to what was the hotel over there in Overton that used to look like the
French Quarter Inn?
That's it. French Quarter Inn. I get there at 3 a.m., walk over, and they go get Matt Damon out of bed and bring him down there, and he's bleary-eyed. And so I met with the trainer, and the poor guy, he was in over his head. He was feeling all the pressure of just everybody so mad at him, and he didn't know what to do. And so I said, all right, just kind of let's act this out for a second. Well, then Matt goes over, starts petting the dogs, and he'd been into the breaks during all these things. He'd been feeding them treats. So the dogs loved him. They're not going to bark and growl at him. And I was like, oh. I said, all right, you're off the hook. You can go back to bed. He was like, really? I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, awesome. I said, but look, tomorrow, I don't want you to, don't even look at these dogs. That's part of the problem. They like you. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that was he's an actor. He's thinking that somebody ought to be able to tell him, action and you need to be mean, and they would do it.
Right.
So anyway, I went and worked with the guy, and I came up with a solution, and so we went kind of off site and did kind of a quick fix on some stuff, and then the next day got over there, did it I told the assistant director how we were going to do it, and I got over to the set. It was so massive, and we got it in the first take, and then we did a backup take, and we were done. And so the way that a lot of those big productions work is your first is AED director or whatever. He's kind of the hatchet guy. He's out there screaming at everybody, and the one that everybody hates. And this guy was no exception. I mean, he was so mad. So he pulled me over the side afterwards. He was like, all right, I have to know right now, what did we do wrong? Because I never want to be in this position again. But you knocked that out in 2 takes, and that was exactly what we wanted. Where did we fail? So I went through it with him. And he said, thank you. So they had an animal wrangler that had been hired from California to come and supervise all the training. But she was a trick trainer. She didn't know anything about animal aggression, all that. And so it wasn't her wheelhouse. And so anyway, then Matt comes over and starts talking to me. And then Red West was in that film. And Red, I didn't know him personally, but we had some mutual friends through Memphis. So we started talking, and he started asking me some pet questions. So then Matt starts asking me some pet questions. And so everybody's going to lunch, and Red was like, here, come with us. I got some other stuff to ask you. I got a new golden retriever puppy. So I go and sit with all the cast, and then I'm like, holy crap, Mickey Rourke's here, and Danny DeVito. I mean, all these stars are sitting at the table. And everybody just starts hammering me with pet questions. So then this other production person comes over and taps me on the shoulder. She's like, you can't be in here with all these. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I start to get up, and Matt Damon pipes up. He was like, nope, he's staying here. He's entertained us with these pet questions. We all got questions. He stays. And she kind of cowered and ran off. So I was like, okay, this is cool. So I was like, yeah, this is all right. So then another lady comes by and says, can I talk to you for a second? And so they were wrapping lunch. I walked over, and she was like, you should have not had that conversation with the first AD. He just went and fired the animal wrangler and fired 2 other people. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, he asked me a question, I answered it. And she was like, that's not how things are done. And by then I was kind of sick of it. I just said, you know what? Y'all called me to fix your problem. I fixed it. So sorry, but not sorry. If it's not the way things are LA done, I don't know. It's not my business, and I honestly don't care.
Right.
So She stormed off, comes back 5 minutes later and says, so Francis Ford Coppola was the director, and he stays in a trailer and works from monitors most of the time. She said, Mr. Coppola wants to see you. And I'm like, okay, I'm fired. They kicked me off thing, but I had a good time. I probably won't ever get paid, but I did my part. I got,
Right.
it's fine. So I walk in, the back door opens the trailer. I walk in and he spins around in his chair and looks at me and he said, how do you get a dog to stop peeing on the carpet? And it was just like that moment of like, you know what, no matter who you are, what you're doing, what station you are in life, if you got pet problems. And then he went on to tell me, he was like, we've got this new dog. And he said, my wife is calling me twice a day. He's ruined $20,000 worth of it. And he was like, it's making me crazy. He said, I'm trying to do this film. I've got it. So I talked him through it. He got his wife on the phone. We all talked, and I thought, holy crap, I'm sitting in a trailer with Francis Ford Coppola. And all he wanted, but to him, that was a big thing that was making his life miserable, was that dog peeing on his carpets and getting his wife all cranked up. And so, those lessons got tucked away. And then when I started getting in the media side of it 10 years later and doing the celebrity interviews and all that, that was a known thing to me, of that their pet problems were the same as everybody else's. And in some ways, even more. Some of those huge celebrities that can't go to a local store or things like that, they're kind of, they're insulated from so much from regular life. Their pet and their relationship with their pet is like really a major thing. And it's the only relationship in their life where somebody's not asking them some kind of question or asking them for money or something like that. So it became kind of, I call it the pet ticket, which kind of, permeated my life even still today, of that pet ticket of being able to have conversations with powerful people or celebrities or things like that, where once they find out you're just wanting to talk about their pet, they're so happy to. Nobody ever asks them that stuff.
Right.
But to them, that's a very important relationship in their life. And so they're happy, they're ecstatic to talk about it. And so anyway, that turned into a longer story, but it was
That's
kind
a
of a
great story.
significant thing that changed, my life and really set in motion my knowledge of kind of wow, boy, pets are a powerful subject matter and integral into people's lives. And this was before it turned into what it is, today. Now it's massive. But
What was Regis Philbin like when you met him?
Regis is awesome. I hated that he passed. Regis kind of not photo, but I guess you'd call it TV bombed one of my Today Show appearances when Kathy Lee moved over and started doing. She and Hoda were doing that hour 3 on Today Show. I was doing it one time, and Regis came over to visit, and literally in the middle of us filming a live thing, walks in, and Kathy was like, well, we're doing a pet thing. He goes, oh, this is Tennessee. He doesn't mind. We've been, and I'd done their show like, I don't know, a month before that, because I ended up doing that show like 6 or 7 times in a couple of years. And then he came in and he was exactly like he is on TV, which, not everybody's that way.
Right.
Regis was awesome. The last time I saw him, I think I saw him one more time after that. But it was only a few years before he died. And, the energy he had at that age and the vitality, he was with it too. He was sharp.
Kevin Harrington is one of the original sharks from the hit reality series, Shark Tank. And back in 2017, y'all developed a relationship together. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
So Kev was, coming off of doing Shark Tank, and he had opted out of doing after season 3. He was just like, a lot had changed the way the network was doing the deals and vetting people and all that. And he had other bigger fish to fry. Because at the time, Kevin's net worth was like 4 times what all the other sharks combined was. And he just had so many deals coming his way and so many other things going on that was just becoming cumbersome. And Cuban was wanting to come in and willing to buy his seat in and guarantee a certain amount of investments and all that kind of So he took Kevin's seat. So anyway, Kevin was coming out to Super Zoo in Vegas to do a virtual Shark Tank kind of thing for the pet industry. And at the time, I emceed the new product awards every year at that big, it was kind of like the CES of the pet industry. We just had it 2 weeks ago and it was massive. And I knew he was going to be there, and we had a few mutual friends, and I was like, I want to talk to him because I had a lot of pet product inventors coming to me and people, and I thought, that'd be and I'd heard good things about him. So the guy that ran the convention was going to try and put us together, but that convention's massive. There's 25,000 attendees, and it's crazy. So I wasn't sure whether that was going to happen. I got there early and I was at the hotel next door, and it was too early to check in. I was going to go and walk over to the convention center, and I literally just turned around on a dime and thought, man, I'm just going to go ahead and check my bags. I don't want to drag these things around. So I walked over to the bell desk and was checking in, and I heard this voice to the side of me talking to somebody else and said, "Hey, where's this pet thing? I think I'm in the wrong place." And I recognized the voice. I turned around and it was Kevin. And I just turned around and I said, "You're looking for Super Zoo?" And he said, "Yeah, do you know where it is?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm Harrison Forbes. I think and he was like, "We're supposed to meet, aren't we? But I think the schedule changed." And so I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to go over there, just walk with it." And it was a long walk through this internal mall. It's it's almost a mile on the roof to get to the convention center. And by the time we got there, it was just an immediate connection. And it's been, I think that was earlier than 17. I think it's been 8 years now.
Okay.
9 years. And I just, we were together last week at Super Zoo again, and we've got a couple of neat projects that we're doing together. And Kevin's awesome. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever done business with. Very genuine.
With all the amazing things that you've done, you're also a best-selling author. In 2008, you wrote the book Dog Talk: Lessons Learned from a Life with Dogs. Quote, "Dog Talk will deepen the reader's understanding of dog behavior, and as a result will enable him to approach his own dog in a fresh and motivated way to begin, improve, mend, or strengthen a relationship that can last a lifetime," unquote. And dogschannel.com said of your book, "Entertaining and informative, Forbes' stories will inspire the average owner and help them build a bond with their dog." What made you want to write that book?
So lots of publishers came to me and wanted me to do a book. And I refused to do a training book. Everybody wanted to do, "You got to do a training book, got to do a training book." And I kept saying no. And they were like, "Well, why don't you want to do one?" And I said, because to do a training book, when I do radio, somebody asks me a question, I can ask them one or two qualifier follow-ups and really narrow down and give them usually something that'll probably work.
Right.
Like teaching a dog to sit. There's 20 different ways to do that, but you gotta apply the one that'll work for your situation and your dog, how it learns, no different than a parenting style or something like that. And so the mistake that I always saw with training, and I got to meet Cesar Millan very early on in his career. And, I watched what he went through and still sometimes goes through of, they pigeonholed him into, you got to have Caesar's way, Caesar's method. And that's traditional brand building. You got to have your method, your way to do things. The problem where that falls apart in the dog part of it is that, it may work great for a certain part of dogs, but then there's a whole bunch of dogs it won't work well with because it's not the right application. And when you're doing a one-way medium like reading a book, it's hit or miss. And so then when it misses, then everybody's right. "Oh, it didn't do anything for me. It's terrible.
Right.
It didn't work." And so Caesar's had to deal with so much of that stuff. And I didn't want to do that. And there were a million how-to books. And I just said, "I'm not going to do a how-to book." And they were like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I'm a radio guy." People would come up to me and recall stories that I told. And story was the thing. People remembered stuff when it was embedded in a story. And I said, I'll do a book that tells stories of ones that I know or ones about my own dogs or something like that. And I will use as examples the ones that, there's something out of that that will probably appeal to a dog person, but it's going to teach them a little bit about training, but it's embedded in a story and they'll remember it better. And so, I turned down a lot of deals, but I stuck to my guns on that. And then the publisher that I had a couple of good offers that were willing to do it that way, and ended up going with St. Martin's Press, and that turned out to be a good match.
Does it matter the age of a dog?
But I would go back and change some things now.
Oh, okay. Does it matter the age of a dog when you're trying to train them on to do certain things?
Yes, a lot. Now, that doesn't mean that an old dog can't learn new things. Dogs can learn their entire life, but you have to shape it and approach it and have different levels of expectations. There's definitely seasons in a young dog's first year that you want to do certain things at certain times and not do certain things at certain times. I think sometimes now, well, not now, but for a long time, and still today, people try and do too much, quote, training on a puppy. And I resist that term because you're shaping and imprinting more than you're training. If you do too much restrictive, discipline-y kind of training on a puppy, it takes away some of their ability to think on their own, and they get too handler sensitive and too like, okay, I can't do anything unless somebody tells me to. It manifests in different ways, but I, coming from a working dog background, I don't like to do anything that crushes drive. I like to take drives and energy and things and channel it into what I want. So that's really shaping and coaching. So I like the word coaching better with a dog under 12 months. But then, there's things that if you've got a large breed dog, there's a lot of things that happen physiologically to them that like when a large breed dog is 7 months or 6 months to 9 months, they go through kind of a stupid phase where their brain just kind of doesn't really absorb a whole lot of information, but their body's growing at everything. It takes every amount of energy that the dog has to keep up with the growth of their body. And so trying to teach them a lot during that phase is you don't move the needle very much. And so if you watch some of these great trainers that really know their stuff, and I've been benefited from having such really good teachers to learn from over the years, some of those guys that never been to an official training thing in their life but have been training dogs all their life, you'd hear the same things from them, and they'd be like, okay, I'm doing this when they're 5 weeks to 15 weeks and blah blah blah, and then when they're 7 months, you just put them up and just let them be dogs for a couple of months, and then you pick the learning phase of training back up at 11 or 12 months. And there's reasons for that. And so, and again, it varies from dog to dog. But yeah, to your question, you can always train and learn new things. Conversely, one of the things that I think the training industry does not talk about enough, dogs can unlearn a lot of things too. Like housebreaking is a great example. Oh, my dog's housebroken. Okay, I moved to a new house and all of a sudden he's peeing on the floor. Right. Well, it's a new house. Everything's different. So unless he is super conditioned to a surface association, you got to kind of back up and start all over him before he gets into a bad habit of going on the carpet again. It happens all the time. You get a 7-year-old dog that's been house trained great. You move to a new house. He goes to the bathroom 10 days in a row on carpet. Now all of a sudden he's going outside and holding it, waiting to go back inside to go on the carpet. So they can unlearn things sometimes too, in certain, especially housebreaking and bathroom habits.
After James Gandolfini was best known for his role in Tony Soprano, he suddenly passed away on June 19th of 2013. And, he was only 51 years old. And he once said, quote, "Harrison Forbes is who I will use for all my dog advice," unquote. The day he passed away, you said of him, quote, "My heart is heavy at the loss of good friend Jim Gandolfini. You took in a Tennessee hillbilly and always treated me like a brother. From your crazy pranks to taking my son on great trips and along the movie set, you'll be missed by all. My prayers go out to Deb and Michael." You obviously had a special friendship with him. Tell us a little bit about what he was like away from the camera.
Jim was awesome. I miss him a lot still. My oldest son, Parker, is a musician and tours around now and doing very successful things in music. And Jim was the one that got him into it. That happened in New York so I was doing the radio show from New York at the time, and Jim's son Michael, who's now an actor, which I can't believe because Jim would never have wanted him to do that, but they were the same age. So I would a lot of times when I was coming up doing the radio show, then I had a Sunday morning show that started pretty early over at ABC, and I was having to MC and go to a lot of events on Saturday nights, and so a lot of times Parker would go up with me on the weekend, and I'd drop him off at Jim's on Saturday, and then go back Sunday morning. He'd spend the night at their house. He and Michael would do stuff, and Jim he was. You always hear stories about, I think sometimes they overplay it a little bit about, oh, he was just a big teddy bear and all that. Jim was a very nice guy, but he had a hot temper too. I mean, he could be a crusty, and I loved that. I mean, he and I got along from the first time we ever met. And Jim was so generous. He still would go, and it's funny, in all the years I did things with him, I only ever met one other cast member. Even though they were friends, Jim still, by and large, hung out with his childhood friends. So every summer he rented a huge house on the Jersey Shore, and he would come in and out, but he would rent it for a month or 2 months. And it was all his high school and childhood and college buddies and their families. And, there'd be 10 bedrooms in this house. And, we got invited into that circle. And, those guys used to call, and Jim would prank call my show because it was a live show. And he'd prank call my show, and sometimes he'd do these crazy voices. And I would figure out it was him. And I would think, if people knew that was, because at the time, this was at the height of the Sopranos stardom.
Yeah.
And I thought people would never believe that was Jim Gandolfini calling and, asking me about how do you get a dog to stop humping your leg or something, crazy stuff like that. But yeah, he was great. He was a great friend.
How can having a DNA test for certain dogs help an owner understand certain behaviors that their dogs exhibit?
Well, you go back to the origins of what is a domesticated dog. Why do we have domesticated dogs? We have them because at some point somebody decided I need a dog to do X, Y, Z, whether that is to be a protector, to be a companion, to be a small companion, be a large herding dog. I need them to do something. So that specialization is why we have breeds. And so most breeds were bred for a purpose up until probably 25 years ago. And then it started really going into more of non-purpose things. But as that was going on in that specialization, you're breeding for characteristics. If you're breeding a bunch of herding dogs over multiple generations, if you have 5 puppies and 3 of the puppies don't care anything about herding, you didn't breed those dogs. So those genes didn't get carried forward. And so it's just part of, monitored genetic evolution of selecting for breeding. And so that's what's happened in all these dog breeds. So I think what people have a bad tendency to do is they neglect people really do this to the detriment of going back to that whole relationship with your dog. If you neglect the genetic ancestry of your dog, you are setting yourself up for a lot of problems. This whole adage of, well, it doesn't matter what the dog is, it's how you raise them. I can tell you, and every scientist and geneticist will tell you this, and every real dog trainer that has been involved in training a lot of dogs over a lot of time will tell you genetics is 75 to 80% of your dog's personality, his behavior, how he acts. It's massive. We want to pat ourselves on the back and think if we have a good dog, it's all because we raise him so great. That's 25% of it. You're shaping, but you're dealt the cards the minute they come out of the mother of 75% of what you got to work with.
Right.
So if you live in an apartment on the 30th floor and you go buy an Australian Shepherd because you saw one on TV and they look cute, and then the dog's running in circles and he's frustrated and chewing your house up and making you nuts, you might think, wow, I should have learned that that is a breed that has a turbo engine motor and they need to be outside and on a farm and get massive amounts of exercise or else they're going to be frustrated and unhappy. And so when you have mixed breed dogs, a lot of times people don't really know what's in there. They might know the type, but they don't know the genetic makeup. So part of the benefit of having your dog genetically tested is finding out what breeds are in there, because there's a lot of breeds that have very significant inherited problems, whether it's hip dysplasia in some breeds, like some, American show shepherds and things like that, or eye problems in some of your breeds. And so you can research that and find out, once you find out the genetic makeup of your dog, take the top two breeds that make that dog up and research those breeds and see what they have a high propensity to. Like, boxers have an unbelievable, like a 10x chance of having cancer, like breast cancer in the female dogs. And so if you've got a boxer mix, then that's something you think, okay, well, I know that now, so I'm going to have my vet really screen for that a little bit more and get out in front of it. So
Right.
that's the main reason. And behaviorally too, you find out certain things that maybe you didn't know about that breed and think, oh, well, that's why he does so and so. That's why he likes to run in circles when my kids are getting in a pool. It's a herding dog, and he's thinking that they're in trouble, and so he's trying to herd them. And it explains a lot of behaviors.
Back in 2016, you were on the Fox News channel and you did a segment where you talked about MRIs on the dog brain. It can help them process the meaning and emotion behind some words. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, you may have to refresh my mind on that. I'm trying to think of, there's been so many studies and so many, I can't remember what we were talking about specifically that day.
Yeah, it was just the segment was it used. I went back and watched and everything. You were just talking about how an MRI on the dog's brain can help people understand that the dogs are able to understand a little bit more. They can process the meaning behind things a little bit more than what we actually realize they can.
Yes and no. So from a recognition standpoint, yes, but you have to understand that a dog takes in information. Yeah, 30 years ago, if somebody would have said, there's several breed types of dogs that can learn up to 200 different words, people would have said that's crazy.
Right.
We know that's true now, but the asterisk to that is sometimes they learn those words, and whereas we take a word and know the meaning of it, a dog learns a word through repetition and all that, but it's through the totality of what's going on at the time. So a lot of times you get a dog that will learn a word, and there's something going on that around them. They take in the whole picture and associate it with that word. So if you take them out of that climate and put them somewhere else and give them the word, they may kind of recognize it, but they won't do the command or the behavior. And to show that, I used to do demonstrations sometimes. I could only do it when I was around, a lot of working dog guys because they understood more of it, and I had access to dogs that I could do. So what I would do is, like, if I was at a Schutzen place where I knew a dog had a Schutzen title on it, and it was a dog I didn't know,
right,
but I knew the training that it had. I knew what commands it had done, and it had earned a title in that thing. And I knew the dog was very pattern trained to compete in a trial in a certain way. I would go, and if it was a friendly dog, a dog that would take commands from somebody else, I could go take that dog, and I would put them through an entire obedience and a part agility routine, speaking nothing but gibberish. And the point was that the command, while the dog understands it in a piece, I was putting them in a position in a framework where they knew what they were supposed to be doing at certain times. And when they came up to a jump and heard a command, they were supposed to jump. And they heard another one, they were supposed to come back, and healing and a certain thing and doing all these different things. That was more, that overpowered the word. So context, for the average pet owner, what that translates into is tonality supersedes words. So the tonality that you use with your pet, and it has way more power for the dog understanding that what you're wanting and what you're trying to get across to them than the actual verbiage. Because that's what with police dogs, because I imported dogs from multiple countries, from
Right.
Russia and all this, and then you would always have to convert them over to a language, and it wasn't that hard because you would take the dog and put them in a training scenario that they knew exactly what they were supposed to do, and then you start substituting those words, but the word still, they were doing what they knew. This guy sounded kind of weird about it, but then after 50 times, you're like, oh, okay, well, he means do this. And that's how you do it.
Former heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson, at one point in time maintained, trained, and raced 350 birds. And he's called pigeon racing his first love. And back in September of 2016, you had a chance to hang out with the champ at his house and talk pigeons and bird genetics. That had to be really cool.
Yeah, so that was a Kevin deal. Kevin was in Vegas, and he was there at a trade show I can't remember what the trade show was. And I was in town doing something, and we met, and he was like, hey, we're working a deal with Mike Tyson, and we're trying to get him to do a spokesperson thing on this product we got. He goes, don't you know him? And I said, I don't know him, but I reported before on some of his stories about the pigeons and all that. He was like, man, why don't you come along? He goes, y'all talk pigeons or something, because I've heard that's a big deal to him. I said, yeah, it's his life. And he's like, well, come over, So I took a cab over to Mike's house and walked in, and it was all, there was attorneys and all these business partners and there was like 20 people. They're all sitting around a table. I just kind of ease in, and I'm just kind of just hanging out there and all that. Probably an hour into it, Mike turns and looks to me, and he goes, what do you do? You hadn't said anything. What's your role in all this? I said, champ, I'm just the dog guy. He said, and I said, and the pet guy. And I said, I'm just here to talk pigeons. He was like, really? And then he said, I've seen you on TV before. He said, that's why I asked you. He said, I've seen you somewhere before. And he had seen me on TV stuff. And he just got up and just got me. We walked outside, left everybody inside, and we sat there. Like 2 hours later, his attorney kind of peeks out. It's like, hey, champ, can we finish this meeting? I know y'all are having a good time. And man, he knows so much about pigeons. And, he just came alive when we started. He was bored to tears, listening to all that,
Sure.
the business talk and all that stuff. And he was just so excited to talk pigeons. And I knew a good bit about pigeons, from because behaviorally, there's just so much about them that's just incredible. And so I was asking him a lot of pretty in-depth questions, and he wasn't used to that, but he knew all the answers. And so he was really excited to be able to talk some of the science and some of the how you start them out, how you train them, how you do this, how you bring young birds along with old ones. And I mean, I was fascinated by all that stuff. That 2 hours went by, it seemed like in 5 minutes. And then he was trying to get me to stay, and I had a flight to catch, and he was like, no, man, just stay. He goes, we'll take him out in the morning. So I'm still dying to do. I told Mike then, I said, I want to do a TV segment on this, like a full show though, where we go and do the races and start. I want to follow you doing the science of it. And he was so excited. So that's on my bucket list. But he just turns into a different person. When he was nothing but nice, and he loves those pigeons and really knows a lot about it. And he told me, and I saw it in an interview about 6 months later, where he said, boxing is what I used to do, but pigeons is the one constant in my life. And it's, his thing. Always has been.
That had to be such a fun day.
Yeah, it really was. It was like, wait, I met Mike Tyson.
I know. Actor and comedian Bob Saget passed away this past January. You had the opportunity to meet him several years ago, and you said of him, quote, "Rest in peace, Bob. One of the most hilarious interviews I ever did. At the end, I couldn't stop laughing. A quick Q&A turned into a monologue of his personal pet stories that were epic." Tell us a little bit about that day.
Yeah, the sad part about that is Bob's comedy style was pretty raunchy. And so that entire interview, I couldn't use really any of it for anything. It would have just been a series of constant bleeps, the funny stories. But and it was funny because it was not prepped at all. He just launched into this, his ability to really tell some funny stories and say a lot of really hilarious things. But he loved pets. He had a great kind of vibe about him. He was engaging and fun and, just like that. That was very early in my career. That was before I was really doing a lot of the big TV stuff. And I was at an event and I was doing a few things, but, that was a big red carpet thing at a pet charity thing. And he sat there and talked to me forever and made it me feel like I was the most important guy to talk to at that time. And like I said, I was kind of a nobody back then, and it was nice. He made you feel that way.
The Rescue Train is a nonprofit organization based in LA that has fundraisers to save animals' lives. And you were the MC in 2019 Race for the Rescues. And they said of you, quote, "What we love most about Harrison is his beautiful heart. It's evident how much he cares about animals and the animal welfare community. He's volunteered his time and energy for many years to now make Race for Rescues a huge success. We cannot be more grateful to him," unquote. I believe that just like kids, dogs also know when someone is being genuine and sincere with them too. Where did all this passion start with dogs and stuff when you were younger?
I've never heard that quote before. That was nice. That's one of my favorite events. I've done Jane
Lynch.
Lynch and I do that event every year, and there's a few years that Jane hadn't been able to do it when she's been off shooting a movie, but it's super intimidating doing that show with her, but I love it at the same time because I tell you, she has got the best comic mind. And when we MC that, we do this part of the thing that she and I do together on stage is we have this. There's about 50 different nonprofit shelters there, and they each bring up two dogs, and they walk them on that are available for adoption. And we just get like this little card that just has kind of their basics, and then it's up to us to just improv a bunch of like build this big personality around them and say things. And I'm usually really good at that, but Jane is on like such a different level. It's like hard so I just started playing the straight guy and let her, because she's so funny and the stuff she says is that she comes up with on the cuff. It's amazing. And she's awesome. And we've become good friends over the years. But yeah, so going back to your question, I don't know, I've just always loved animals and always, started a lot with wild animals. But I've always loved dogs. I think it was the dog part of it was kind of that boy and his dog, that Lassie story of when I was young, there was a dog in the neighborhood that was kind of neglected. Turns out it's funny. Now as an adult, I appreciate it was a Belgian Malinois, long haired, was a Tervuren at the time, but back then they were kind of the same breed. So it had all this working ability in it, and it would always scale their 6-foot fence and get out. And I just kind of started doing things with the dog. I didn't know anything about training. I was like 8 years old, and but I was able to get the dog to do all these things, and it was like, wow, it's like my buddy. We can go in the woods together and hunt or play games and hide and seek and all these things. And so you get feedback like that and build a relationship, and it was really awesome. And so that was a really good introduction to that side of it. I've always loved wild animals and things too, but you have a relationship with a dog that's kind of hard to replicate in other animals.
No, it was. I mentioned earlier that you're now an industry partner with Maxim Partners, and you said of them, "quote Working with a group like Maxim is a dream come true. The great team at Maxim has the perfect combination of people, resources, and brain power, along with a lean, fast-moving approach and a proven track record of success." Unquote. Tell us about the work you're doing with them and how the things that you did in the dog industry and the pet industry and being a celebrity expert, how that's helped you transition into this.
It was, I would say part of it was a little bit of a natural progression, but then a lot of it was also undoing a lot of preconceived notions from people. So for a long time in that industry, companies that I would do spokesperson things for, whether it was some that were outside of the pet industry that wanted to do some kind of pet campaign or project like Toyota or Qualcomm or some of the Progressive Insurance, I would do the spokesperson thing, but they just saw me as the trainer and the spokesperson guy. So the marketing person in me and the business side of me, the entrepreneur part, never really got a chance to, in those big companies, never got a chance to flesh itself out a lot of times because you were pigeonholed into that from the beginning. So to get into more of the marketing side of it and being a consultant for those kinds of things took a long time, and with some it was easier than others, and so it goes back to, there were a lot of times where I just volunteered to sit in rooms and listen into some of the meetings and things like that, unpaid and all that, just because I wanted to have an opportunity. I had to build that platform to be able to show that side of what I could do or give it away. I mean, there was times where I would go do something with a company and then I'd go home and write an entire marketing proposal that, yeah, I should have gotten paid for, but they wouldn't have paid me for. I'm the trainer, so I would just give it to them, and I had to build that recognition through just doing and proving myself. And some people saw it earlier than others, and so it progressed in different ways with different people, but it took a while to do that. And so the thing I'm excited about with Maxim is it's kind of that that verification of that I've really been able to do that with a lot of companies and a lot of and I've got great relationships. So I mean, there's some of the big pet companies out there that I've been doing things with for 20 years now almost. And it started out a lot of times as the trainer spokesperson and then has morphed into more of the business side of it and all that. But yeah, it took some energy and some work. But I guess my point to listeners is, no matter what industry you're in, if you're kind of reinventing yourself and stuff, take your skills, and sometimes you can't stand up on the, oh, well, I should get paid for this. Sometimes if you got an opportunity to showcase them, sometimes you got to give some things away to be able to let people see what you can do and let those other skill sets shine. And don't be afraid to do that. I mean, that's how you can change that positioning of how you're viewed. And so with Maxim, they're a great company. I started out consulting with them. They've got about 3 different verticals they're involved with: education, and then human nutrition and supplementation, things like that. And then they've got the pet side. They had a company called Zesty Paws that they bought in early 2000, late 17, early 2018 for $2.7 million. And they sold it last fall for 610. It's probably the best pet product supplement sale, increase in sale over a 4-year period in the history of the industry. So it's very well known, that thing. So, Maxim has got a lot of credibility in that space doing what they do. And they asked me to come on this winter as a partner from being a consultant. And I'm enjoying that. So we're actively looking for a few good companies out there to kind of zestify and do what they do. But they're very conscientious. They've got they steer a lot towards sustainability. Kind of, the products have to be good and have to do something beneficial. They've got a process that I really like and can get behind.
So you're also doing some stuff on your own with HForbes Consulting too?
Yes. So, I do a lot of independent consulting for, obviously a lot of things that are pet industry and pet industry related. But then there's a lot of companies that are not in the industry that hire me to, hey, we want to get to that customer. Because the pet industry, it's you almost three quarters of the households have at least one pet. And so, and if you look at that 70% of pet owners, it's a very good buying pool. It's a good group to market to and all that. However, it's also very vast and wide. I always point to, I remember when I was doing my syndicated show, I got a call one time. These were back to back calls. I got a call from a lady who I knew her. I'd met her before at a fundraiser, and she was a very old money New York social. She was in her 70s then, and she had a Maltese that she was having issues with. And I mean, she was like the epitome of the Upper East Side, living in the penthouse, driver and all of that kind of stuff. And she called me about a problem she was having on air. And then the next call was a guy who turns out they all listened, and he was legitimately from a Hells Angels group in Arizona, and they raised Connie Corsos, and he was having problems with those dogs. And it wasn't like, we're having trouble training the dogs to kill me. It was like housebreaking stuff. And those calls came in back to back. And I remember thinking, that's the pet industry. It's both of those problems were kind of the same kind of behavioral things, but those two owners and their life experience and their demographic and their expenditure it was opposite ends of the spectrum. So it's been difficult sometimes for companies to zero in on, quote, the pet owner, because it is so vast and wide.
Um, Dr. Joseph Woodrow Forbes Jr., your dad, who I know you were very close with, he passed away a little bit over 5 years ago. He was a huge Vol fan. He loved golf. He was a hunter, outdoorsman, accomplished pilot too, and I think he could also sing. Tell us a little bit about Woody.
Yeah, he could do all of those things. It's funny. I appreciate more of those that versatility as I'm older now. Dad had a zest for life for sure, and was not afraid to. And at times it was intimidating because Dad just kind of had that golden touch of everything he ever tried. He was usually pretty successful with, so it was kind of a hard act to follow sometimes. But yeah, that was him, and he enjoyed life and people and lived it to its fullest.
And he practiced. Well, he was an ortho for what, 50 years. He was in business.
Yeah, he was, and he built, I think, at the time, like the eighth largest orthodontic practice in the country. A lot of satellite. He kind of pioneered some of the way they did satellite offices and things that a lot of other dentists and orthodontists have kind of copied through the years. And he took a different approach.
Well, he obviously must have been really good at what he did to be able to do it for that long. So I know you had to be really
Yeah,
proud of him.
Dad taught me good. There were good lessons to be learned from the way he had almost a zero turnover at with his offices. And I remember him telling me, at the time you're a kid, you don't listen to stuff like that. And it's
Sure.
like, oh, okay, whatever, Dad. But I remember him saying one time, he said, they only did a 4-day work week. They always had Fridays off. They said they worked 10 hours, 4 days a week. And he put it up to a vote, and they switched to that, like, when he was younger than me, and he said, I always paid 10% more than what all the other orthodontists and people were paying for the same in town. And he said, that all his business advisors stuff were like, why do you do that? And he said, you know what? I don't ever wake up in the morning worrying about, are people going to show up to work? And the only time anybody ever left him was when they either moved or, uh, you know, retired. And there was always 5 other people waiting in line for that job. And he did cool things like, for a long time, every 2 or 3 years, everybody that had been with him for 10 years or more, he would take them and their spouses on a cruise. And I mean, that would cost him like sometimes $50,000, $100,000.
Wow.
But it was like, but again, that was one of those things that nobody ever wanted to quit, and
Right.
everybody showed up, and people loved that job, and so he never had to worry about stuff like that.
Now, Harrison, I know of three of your four children. I think you said you have four. I know of three, and I'll let you tell me about the one that I don't mention. I know Parker, I think, is 23. Alexandra Jane is 20, and Chandler's 17, if I got that right.
Yeah,
And
that
and
is correct.
Chandler just competed in his first triathlon sprint version, got first place in under 25, finished eighth overall. This past, I believe, July 18th, your daughter, you call Alexandra Jane Janie, had a birthday. You said, quote, "How is this precious angel 20? Wow, how time flies." And you mentioned Parker is a musician, has a band called the Criticals, and they've been called the hippest band in Nashville. And, when Parker was 12, he played at the House of Blues in LA, and now he has Warner Records looking at him too. I know you must be proud of all your children. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so Parker, it's one of those things where they're all so different, but then similar in a lot of ways too. And it goes back to kind of some of my genetic talk about dogs. As parents, and I think when it comes to people, we're so much more complex than an animal. There is a lot more of the influence of nature versus nurture. However, when I have discussions with parents, a lot of times, and they talk about the different personalities, like, these kids grew up in the same house, how are they so different, and all that kind of stuff. When you kind of delve into it a little deeper, a lot of times you realize, and because I always talk about it, pretty much the personalities of all my kids, the core part of it was there from the beginning. You shape and you mold some of it, and life experience shapes and molds some of that. But a lot of the core parts of their personality were evident from the very beginning. And, with Parker, his was, he was a little introverted, and Parker has, and he's fine with me talking about it now. And but we didn't for a long time. He had, and back then nobody knew it as much as that, but he has Asperger's a little bit. And I always, when school counselors were always like, you need to put him on medication for ADHD, and I was like, just don't think that's what it is. Well, yeah. So and I always fought that, and then honestly, this is like one of those crazy moments in your life. I was flying. I had to do a show in Miami, and I was flying from Los Angeles to Miami, which is a really long flight. And by pure chance, I sat next to a girl on the plane. She was a grad student at University of Miami, which has the most decorated teen and young adult Asperger's research things. And she was a research assistant there, and a grad student. And I mean, I like was broken down in tears twice during that flight. I mean, and that was a friendship that, still to this day, we keep up with each other. And she told me so many incredible things about him in that flight, of like this and try this. And it gave me some tools and made me think of things in a different light. It kind of diagnosed him over the plane ride of some
Right.
things that were bothering me, of like, I can't, just like that. Like, I knew that the typical hyperactive, that wasn't it. It was something else. And she just started describing, does he do XYZ when you do XYZ? And it was like, I was like, wow, it's like you've been sitting on my shoulder for the past 6-7 years. And she gave me a couple of little things to do that I did the next day, and immediately things changed. It was like crazy. And so that, really, and that, the music part of it, he always loved music. And then, when the thing happened with Jim, where, so Gandolfini, one time, he and Michael used to do these little air show things. So when I'd come pick him up on Sunday mornings, we had to sit and eat breakfast while the boys did like a air band show to some songs and stuff. And Michael Gandolfini had one of these little kid drum sets. And so Parker was sitting there, and one day Jim was like, he's really playing those drums. I was like, what? He was like, look at him. He's playing the drums along with that song. And I was like, yeah, I guess he's kind of keep eating. He goes, you got to get him a drum set. I said, Jim, I'm not getting him a drum set. They're loud. It's a waste of money. The next week, it's just money. No, you got to get him a drum set. So then in typical Jim fashion, hey, Parker, you got to, when your birthday's coming up, you're going to get a drum set, right? And he was like, I'd love one. He goes, all right, if your dad didn't get you a drum set, you let me know. I'm going to get you a drum set. I was like, thanks, Dick. And so, sure enough, Parker's birthday, he and Michael call, and then we're on like a speakerphone call. I wishing him a happy birthday when he turned 10. And Jim was like, did you get that drum set, Parker? And he was like, no, sir. And he was like, all right, Parker, I told you I'm getting you a drum set. So we had that call, and then I called him afterwards. I'm like, do not send a drum set. He said, up too late. Sure enough, 2 days later, he said, all right, Aldo, who was like his right-hand guy and a musician, came down with a new drum set, stayed for 2 days at the house, set it up, put a little PA thing, gave him some drum lessons, and that was then that was how it all started. So, yeah, Jim definitely, because I played in a band in college and did all that as a guitar player, but drums was just something that you could spend a fortune on, and then if somebody didn't like it, you had a lot of stuff to hang clothes on that took up a lot of room. But yeah, so that was him, and then Allie Jane's our only daughter in the family for many generations, and so she's got a big heart and learning kind of what she likes to do and figuring out the world's her oyster and deciding kind of what career path she wants to take. And then Chandler's a little bit like my youngest brother, and then kind of like dad a little bit of everything he does turns out. So it's been a pretty good ride for him. He's good in sports. He's a great student, so he's got some good opportunities to pick where he wants to go to school this coming year. And he's one of those kids that from day one woke up smiling and happy. I mean, he used to sing himself to sleep in the crib, and that was nice, especially after you had a couple of criers. It was he's happy every day he wakes up. It's been that way since the beginning.
That plane flight that you had sitting next to that woman, I don't believe in coincidences. That happened for a reason.
Absolutely. And it's funny, at one time I thought, man, I'm going to write like a little novella on people that I met on planes, because I've had some pretty significant life altering things by sitting next to people on planes. And like with Parker's career, I ended up sitting on a plane one time with the vice president of Epic Records, and they ended up extending a deal to him like a year later through me meeting her. And she had Rottweilers. She just was kind of looking over my shoulder when I was editing some pet stuff. And she was like, what do you do with pets? And we started talking, and I was like, well, what do you do? And she was like, well, I'm vice president of Epic Records. And she was the one that discovered Katy Perry. And I mean, she had a huge resume, and she and her husband had 2 Rottweilers, and she was awesome, and made a lot of connections for us. And then I sat next to Taylor Swift's dad one time on a flight, and we talked all the way back. And he made some calls and got Parker a drumstick sponsorship when he was like 14.
Wow.
And yeah, so and it's a shame now because nobody does that anymore. Now everybody's got their headphones in, they're watching a TV or a screen that's built in the thing, and the whole meeting the person next to you has gone so out of vogue to where now nobody, like if you ask somebody or strike up a conversation, it's just so out of context and people are not comfortable with it anymore. And it's a shame because I've met some incredible people that I still keep up with sitting on all those flights back and forth.
What are the most important lessons that you've learned in your life?
Wow. Boy, that's a wide berth. I think a lot of them now that I appreciate is, spend energy on the relationships in your life. I think it's easy to get bogged down with work and life and things like that, and you neglect other. I mean, I did that for a long time when I was decided I was going to do the pet career, and I was traveling on the weekends and all that. And then when I would come home, it was, you got all the kids at the house, you got to do kid stuff, and you blink and 10, 15 years have gone by and you hadn't kept up with friends. And look, it's easier now than ever. There's no excuse for not keeping up with people and with Facebook and all the other things that you can do. But that at the end of the day, that's the important thing.
Right.
I mean, when somebody's sick and has a terminal diagnosis, they never sit there and go, man, I wish I'd have spent another 2 hours a day at the office,
Right.
And so keeping up with, I make it a point now to spend time on, keeping up with people that mean a lot to me, because, I'm at that age now, we are, where you got friends that are dying that are our age, and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what? And you think, man, I should have talked to him more. I should have, and so for me, it's that, and then also I think outside of the relationship part of, don't be afraid to try new things. I think when I'm at that spot where I'm like, wow, I'm really about to be an empty nester, and this is kind of the last third of my life. So I still feel really young. So it's a lot of times I get in that mindset of, oh, well, I want to do so and so, but I'll do that when I get older. I'll do that when I get older. And it's kind of like, well, we got to start planning this stuff now. And don't be afraid to just kind of start doing something really different, or something that you're passionate about. But do it in a smart way too. Of take what you're passionate about and plan out. How can I take this passion and make that into a job or into a hobby or something that I can spend time doing, that what can make you, how can you design stuff to where you're excited to get up in the morning and do it. And that takes some planning sometimes, and has to be intentional, but you can do it. I mean, now better than any other time in human history. And it's never too late to do that.
We've known each other for about 32 years, and it's just
so crazy.
I know.
Say that.
I know. 1990. As successful as you were, selling Cutco with me back in the day, and as confident as you were, I knew undoubtedly you were going to have a big impact on this world. And, I'm not always right, but I was right about that. I was definitely right about that. I'm really glad that you and I have been able to reconnect again on here, and definitely want to have you back on again to talk more about in depth about Maxim, about HForbes Consulting, because I know you have a lot to share, and there's probably a lot of people out there that could benefit from that too.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's great talking to you. And I love that you're doing this. You've always been such an awesome people person.
Thank you.
Doing a podcast is, like, where was this stuff 30 years ago?
Right.
I think about the young people that are kind of wired the way we are. There's no excuse for them not to get into some epic things, because there's just so many things available out there. So I do envy them for that. But again, it's never too late. We're proof of it.
Absolutely.
Right here.
Dude, once again, I appreciate you coming on today, and look forward to having you on again sometime soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Harrison. Thank you.